Welcome back, True Crime Besties. I'm Emma,
And I'm Meg.
and today we are talking about Lucy Letby.
This has been full on researching this. We're just saying that, looking at it just in depthly over a week, it's hard to read about this case.
Yeah, we listened to the podcast as it was coming out. So the podcast is called The Trial. It has several seasons, but they have a season dedicated to Lucy Letby and to the trial. And I found that listening to it, week by week, an hour a week, you could kind of process and deal with. But when I was looking into researching for today and doing it all in one go, it's pretty heavy.
It's really heavy. I mean, when we're talking about babies being murdered, it's not not nice at all. But I think what the another layer of it for I guess the two of us is that it's so peak of when we were having our own babies too, when this was taking place, 2015, 2016, that it just adds that another layer of connection to these parents, and their loss.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had, as you said, we had young babies at the same time, and you just think, oh, imagine going through this when you're at your most vulnerable as a family. And to have somebody make that even worse, you just can't even imagine it.
Yeah. So I guess we should get straight into it in terms of
I think we should.
or is. I mean, it's a very recent case, really. So Lucy Letby was a nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital. She graduated in 2012 and started working at the Countess, that was, as it is known in the area. And she was working in the maternity ward, where basically they have 3,000 babies born there per year. And she was working in the neonatal area, looking after some of the smallest and most vulnerable babies that were born in the area. So they were looking after babies. I can't remember exactly how young they would go, because there was 27 weeks.
I believe so, yeah.
They would take on.
Yep.
Which obviously, I mean, having a baby at 27 weeks they're tiny and they're vulnerable. Yep. And so, yeah.
I think they had different levels of care at the hospital too. They had a neonatal intensive care unit down to sort of special care. So for babies requiring slightly less care, but still needing that extra attention. And Lucy Letby always wanted to work with the babies needing the highest amount of care, which was a 1-to-1 ratio. So one nurse to one baby. That's how vulnerable they were and how much intensive care they needed.
Yeah.
And she was quite often rostered, I think, by, she'd request to be in that high care setting.
They had numbers, and there was nursery 1, nursery 2, nursery 3, sort of, and 1 being the highest care required, which, so that was where she would often request to work. Yeah. And night shifts too. She really liked night shifts, which all the other nurses loved, that she loved night shift, because they could pretty much rely on her that if ever they didn't want to work it, she'd pick up a shift for them and do night shift. She loved her job. Yeah. So 2015, the hospital started seeing a rise in deaths in babies, which, as we were just saying, that they're, these are really vulnerable babies. And I guess when you hear about premature babies, you sort of think to yourself, that is it possible, that these babies aren't going to make it because they are so little? But with modern science, these little babies make it through. It's quite rare for them to have deaths, to be honest. And I was looking at the figures, and in 2010, they only had 1 death for the entire year on that ward at that hospital. And then in 2011 and 2012, each year they only had 3 deaths. And then in 2013, there was 2 deaths. And in 2014, there was 3, which then jumped to 8 deaths in 2015. So it's a considerable change in that 1 year of how many deaths there were on the ward. So from there, they started looking at, why this was happening. Well, more so the consultants than the actual management of the hospital, to be honest, which we can get into a bit more.
That's it. Yeah. But I think you're absolutely right. I think it's worth noting that this increase in deaths happened over about a 12-month period between June 2015 and June 2016. And as you were saying, there was the consultants on the ward, so the doctors on the ward, who noticed that there was, quite a number of unexplained deaths of infants and babies who had otherwise, as Meg said, were vulnerable and absolutely needed the extra care, but there was no indication that they were at death's door or that they were going to pass away from any of their inherent complications due to being born early.
Exactly. These babies that were dying were ones that were healthy prior to having to these collapses and dying. There was also the jump in collapses of babies who don't necessarily pass away, but definitely an increase in also just the number of crashes that they needed to
sentinel events.
Yeah,
that's it. That's exactly right. I think at the start, the hospital just kind of turned a bit of a blind eye to it all as well. The consultants weren't really taken seriously. There wasn't really much done when they first raised their concerns.
It was quite early on that they started raising their concerns. It was after the third baby that passed away. Already, Dr. Stephen Breary, who is the head consultant on the ward, he raised the flag at that point, which we're talking July 2015. So from June to July, there were 3 deaths. And Dr. Breary already raised the flag with management that there was an increase in deaths and that Lucy Letby specifically was on shift for each of those deaths. So he already was flagging that there was something going on with this nurse as early as that.
So I know there was an instance where he found Lucy Letby standing over a baby who wasn't breathing, who was desaturating. So their oxygen saturation was low because they weren't breathing. So alarms were going off and she was doing nothing. Did that happen in that time? Do you know? Was that within that first 3? Was that what gave him the idea to look into her? I actually can't remember which baby that related to.
And I feel like that also happened with another doctor as well, Dr. Ravi as well, working on something as well, which then he was a bit later on coming in, like he wasn't like it was far in, but he wasn't as early as that July 2015 raising the flag. But I think it was about the October. Dr. Ravi also reported separately, like they weren't like colluding on this. He was raising the flag, Dr. Brewery, with the management. But I believe then independently of that, Dr. Ravi by October reported himself that he was flagging Lucy Letby as being, again, on the ward every time a baby had died, and also that he had seen things that didn't, marry up. So I'm not sure if it was which doctor.
I think Dr. Ravi had actually seen Lucy Letby with some medication that wasn't intended for the patient. So I think he saw her with an insulin syringe in a room for a baby that hadn't been prescribed insulin. So maybe there were a few different red flags there that they were sort of privy to.
Yeah. Definitely.
So when they were going through the trial, after she was charged, the court decided not to name the babies and nor their parents, so not to identify them by name. And they listed the babies as baby A all the way through to baby Q. And when you think you're getting that far down in the alphabet, that's really, really scary.
Well, I think even like when she was actually originally charged, so when she was arrested and charged, she was actually originally charged with the death of 17 babies and 25 collapses, 25 attempted murders. It went to court with only the baby A to baby Q, which accumulated to 7 murders and 10 attempted murder.
That's right.
Yeah, so it actually lessened by the time they got to court was with how many they knew they could potentially prove and actually pin her with. But how scary that is that originally there was, and there is to this day, possibility that she was involved in as many as 17 deaths and 25 attempts when previously like 1 to 3 babies a year had died on that ward. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. Oh, it's unfathomable.
We're talking between that
unfathomable.
June 2015 to June 2016, like a 12-month period.
Yeah, in a 12-month period. Yep. Oh, it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I might just quickly run through each baby, do you think? And we can have a chat about it once we get to the end of it. So baby A, the first baby who passed away, was a newborn twin boy. He died within 24 hours of his birth after Letby was found to inject him with air into his bloodstream, which caused a fatal air embolism. Within 24 hours of that baby dying, the twin sister of baby A also had air injected into her bloodstream. She survived after emergency treatment, and I think it was only so for her, her parents were told to go and get some rest. I think actually when with baby A, their parents were told to go and get some rest, and they were in sort of a side room watching TV when they were called in to say that there was something going on, and, to then witness their newborn baby boy die. Within 24 hours, they would not leave her side, the twin sister's side. And they, I think they'd gone to try and, have a few hours sleep, and were calling overnight. And lo and behold, overnight, the next night when Lucy Letby was on again, the twin sister has also, experienced a catastrophic event. Thankfully, she was able to be revived. Baby C was a premature boy who died after Letby injected air into his stomach through a nasogastric tube. So he had a tube going through his nose into his stomach in order to be fed. This caused a fatal collapse. Baby D was a girl who died after Letby administered an overdose of insulin, leading to hypoglycemia and death. So we can sort of get into this a little bit more later, but they're able to tell in a post-mortem whether or not a baby has been injected with insulin or whether it was just, naturally produced, because they can check to see whether there's any C-peptide in the patient's blood, in the baby's blood. If there is C-peptide, then we know that it was naturally produced insulin because both hormones are released at the same time. This baby didn't have any C-peptide, so they know that it was injected into the baby. Baby E was a premature boy who suffered from severe bleeding due to an air embolism. He died during resuscitation, and I think this one had a massive effect on all of the staff who worked on him, because they worked on him for a very long time in order to try and resuscitate him. And I think it resulted in a consultant and a couple of nurses taking a little bit of time off and needing some time to process it. Baby F was the twin brother of baby E, who survived an insulin overdose that was found to be administered by Letby. Baby G was a premature girl who suffered multiple collapses due to air injections and excess milk feed. So this was the first time Letby had overfed a baby, which, it's horrible. Baby G survived but had severe and ongoing complications, and still lives with those to this day. Baby H was a girl who experienced multiple unexplained collapses, and she narrowly survived after having air injected into her bloodstream. Baby I was a girl who suffered from repeated attempts on her life. So Lucy Letby actually tried, I think, twice. There were 2 attempts on her life, which is why her attempted murder charge was one more than the number of babies implicated. She passed away. Baby J was a girl who survived an insulin overdose, but she suffered from severe hypoglycemia. Baby K, a premature girl who experienced respiratory distress due to tampering with her breathing tube, but she survived. Baby L, a twin boy who suffered from an insulin overdose but survived. Baby M, the twin brother of baby L, who experienced an air embolism but survived. Baby N, a boy who survived an attack involving the insertion of an airway tube but suffered significant trauma with that, so lots of bleeding and I believe a tear. Babies O and P were part of a triplet set.
And naturally
Baby
conceived triplets too.
naturally conceived
Very rare.
triplets. A boy, so baby O was a boy who died after Letby injected air into his bloodstream and stomach. Baby P was the triplet brother of baby O, who also died after air was injected into his system by Letby. The third triplet survived. Baby Q was a boy who survived despite Letby's attempt to kill him by injecting air and tampering with his medical equipment. So I know that's a long list and there's a lot of information there, but I think it just goes to show that this was repeated, consistent abuse.
Oh, absolutely. You can't say that any of that happening is just coincidental. You know, and from all that what you've listed, I mean, she had 4 main ways of inflicting this on children, you know, being the injecting of the air and creating the air embolism, which she had only just received training about in early 2015.
That's
about
right.
how that is like a way that a baby will die and how to avoid it, you know, is what the training was doing. And so she learnt all about that very early in 2015, and then all of a sudden these babies
It's like
start
it gave her an
having that.
idea. Like,
Well, so the other one was overfeeding them. And also then the insulin that she had injected in 2 babies, I think, which they proved, which it really spun the case around once they found that, because it was solid evidence that it was clearly, you know, an embolism or, you know, overfeeding. You can put these things down to potentially, you know, mismanagement or, you know, and things like, you know, accidental things that can occur, whereas the insulin cannot have been an accident. It was most definitely human done and done purposefully.
Proven, and none of the babies who were injected with the insulin were even prescribed it.
Exactly. And it has to be signed off by 2 nurses for it to have been used. They also looked at the fact of, like, what if it was a medication that had been wrongly marked? But the simple fact was it had occurred 8 months apart. So if there was 2 bags of this medication and randomly that had been used 2 months apart, 8 months apart from each other, there would have been red flags from a company that had been marked incorrectly, you know, all these sorts of things that would have been backups to that,
and also it would have impacted far more babies.
Absolutely, exactly.
That's it.
So, and then obviously the fourth way that she used to inflict this on babies was the dislodgement of feeding tubes and things, which they really basically looked at and said that these babies were so little that they're not flailing around and moving, whereas a slightly bigger baby who's at that stage of moving around could dislodge their own feeding tubes and things. But these were such tiny, you know, premature babies. They were not moving around to be able to actually do that. So that had to have been intervened by an adult or a nurse or someone in the hospital to have that moved out of that where they were placed. So much going on here. It's just insane.
Oh, it is absolutely insane. It's just horrific.
Yeah.
So at the end of 2016, I think this was following the death of it was following the incident with baby Q. The hospital decided to conduct their own investigation. I mean, why it took so long and why it took so many babies and so many collapses and so many deaths that's a completely separate systemic issue within the hospital itself, which I think that's since come to light as well. Yeah. But what did they find, Meg, in that investigation?
So the investigation, like basically, this Dr. Dewey Evans that ran the review, basically, he wasn't reviewing it in a criminal sense. He was just reviewing these deaths to see what had been occurring. So from in terms of management of the hospital, but he was the one who really. He was looking at it saying, right, there was about 30 babies that he looked at, and 15 of them he couldn't see any. He could see natural causes and things like that as to why they had passed away. But the other 15 jumped out at him as being very clearly not being able to be marked as natural deaths. So this red flagged big time. And looking further at those, he discovered this is when the insulin issue was discovered. So this is 2 years after the fact of these babies dying that he asked for further looking at I think the testing had been done at the actual death, but no one above sort of a registrar had really looked at the pathology and seen this and noted the fact of that there wasn't any C-peptide produced, as well as the insulin, as you said, indicating that it was synthetic. So, and prior to that, everyone had just sort of believed that, yes, he had high insulin levels and therefore, that's why the baby died. But once he pinpointed that, it was, hang on a second here, there's more to this. And that was finally when the police were called in.
Yeah, so that was in June. I think that was in June or July 2018.
Yeah, yeah.
So 2 years later.
Really far down the track that finally occurred. Yeah, so I think from the get-go with once the consultants were flagging this, they were asking for the police to be called. They knew this was more than that. But the hospital refused. They just refused it. It was unbelievable. They've got a big question to answer. I mean, I was looking at a documentary where there was a family who, I think it was November 2014 that their baby was the Countess, and the mother was saying that she 100% remembers Lucy Letby being on that night and walking in and finding her doing something to her baby, and then all the alarms and bells started going off. So we're going back before 2015 here, going that there's potentially babies prior to this June 2015 that she had harmed. Fortunately, that baby did survive. But
it was lucky the mum came in when she did. I mean, who knows what would have happened if she didn't?
Exactly, yeah. Well, I mean, she came in and obviously disrupt her, but it still triggered something in the baby. It's still, whatever she did was enough to create a collapse. So the baby was lucky to survive it. But they put in a formal complaint to the hospital at that point. So, and directly named Lucy Letby being the nurse
asking for her to be removed from their care. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like that in July 2015 when Dr. Brewery raised the alarm, it wasn't like that was the first time her name was being linked to things even still. So for them to put their head in the sand over this, I mean, I'm all for, supporting your workers and, I understand that these hospitals, mistakes get made. You need to back people up and you need to make sure you've got, everyone's got support in a workplace like that, because it could be pretty full on with, babies that small. And when they do pass away, but at a point, they've got to make sure that they're supporting these families and these babies and making sure they're safe. So,
well, that's exactly right. Yeah. And I wonder if any investigation was done. I don't remember reading anything about it, whether an investigation was done. Surely if a formal complaint submitted, there must be a process that would have had to have, been entered into. But I don't remember reading anything about that. It's like they swept a lot of this under the rug because, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to believe that one of your staff members has done something like this? Of course not.
Well,
but
neither did the doctors want to believe either. Because I remember in interviews saying things like, "Oh, but this is nice Lucy. There's no way Lucy would be involved." And there was like a running joke on the ward between the nurses around, when a baby had collapsed. Oh, was Lucy on again? Ha ha. Yeah. Because they actually genuinely didn't believe that she was someone who could do that.
Yeah, during the trial, there were text messages that were submitted into evidence between her and several different co-workers. And I know there was an exchange where they were basically saying that. They were like, "Oh, no, you were on again last night when that baby collapsed. Oh, are you okay?" And yeah, so it was obviously a widely known thing. Mm. And she, I think, really relished in the attention that brought her.
Definitely. I mean, like you were just saying earlier that there was, after a particular baby, a number of nurses and a doctor took leave, because they needed to recoup after dealing with that. I can only imagine that would be horrendous, having multiple babies passing away on the ward. You would need some time. You've got to look after your own well-being. Lucy Letby never took time off and was the one taking more shifts more than anything. She was relishing in other nurses taking leave from this to go, "Oh, well, I'll take your shifts." For me, that's a red flag in itself, that as someone managing that ward, I'd be saying, "No, Lucy, you've been here for 2 babies passing away, let alone 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep. You need to take time off. We need to make sure you're at your best to be here for us. Take time off." No one seemed to do that.
No, but she even said in some of those text messages that were submitted into evidence, I think one of her co-workers said, "Why don't you take some time? Surely you need it." And she said, "No, I think the best thing for me to get over this is just to go straight back to work." I think after some of the deaths she would go into nursery 2, so into the special care or lower care, and she didn't like that. She always wanted to be in nursery 1, which was, the intensive care, one-on-one, the sickest babies that were in the hospital. Again, terrifying.
Oh yeah.
It just it gives me chills to think that, I don't know, it's like she thrived off of the drama of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. She seemed to just want to be there because she would, I mean, it was in the trial where they showed, she was requesting to be put back in there all the time. She was, anyone said they were going to the toilet in our, nursery 1, she was the first one to put her hand up, and be like, oh, I'll cover you while you're out
Cover
the
that
toilet.
shit. Yeah.
And look at the time the other nurses were loving that they had a nurse who was so dedicated, which just is now you flip back on the reason for that dedication and go, holy
that's
crap.
it.
Yeah.
Holy moly. I think there was another sort of little circumstantial bit of evidence that kind of really added up when it got to the point that the hospital reported her to the police, was when she took some time off from work and went on a holiday with her parents to Ibiza, I think.
Yeah.
And during that time, there were no adverse events on the unit. And given what they'd all been through, that sort of stood out. I think at the start they were thinking, or putting it down to, was it a lack of experience on the ward? Was it not enough consultants? What else could be going on? Could there be a virus that's attacking these babies and causing them harm? They really tried to look at any other possibility.
Yeah.
But as time went on, it just became more and more evident. Lucy was at every single event. When she was away, there were no adverse events. It just, piled up and piled up. So the evidence against her was mounting over that time.
Well, that was the thing. Her defense at this trial was all around the fact that, she was the scapegoat. But when we put it all together with, like, once we found out later, from this that there was red flags waved back in July 2015. She's not the scapegoat then, because clearly these doctors are red flagging it, where the hospital is saying, no, it's not her. So how she could then run a defense on saying, that I'm just your scapegoat. There was, other things that were wrong with the hospital. And even in the trial, when she was directly asked by the prosecution, what is it about the hospital that you are saying is not being done right to keep these babies safe? She was unable to answer.
Yep.
So there was no other point. I mean, I think one podcast I listened to said this really well, that, like, basically, yes, there was no one big arrow pointing at Lucy. It's a lot of little arrows being pointed at her, but there's none pointing in any other direction either.
Well, that's it.
There was nowhere else this was being pointed. There's no other nurse that was on for every shift. There was no other virus found that was lingering around. You tick off all the other possibilities, and all that was left was Lucy Letby.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So when the police arrested her and searched her house, I find this bit so extremely, I mean, it's chilling and fascinating all at the same time, because the psychology behind this blows my mind.
Yeah.
But they found so much evidence in her house. They searched her place, that of her parents, where she lived for part of her time while she was working at the Countess, I believe. And what did they find, Meg? You can do the honors.
Well, in the house, they found the notes of a rambling lunatic, basically.
Yes.
Like, the notes are phenomenal. If you get a chance to have a look online, you can actually just Google search images of the notes and things she left around. And they do question whether she left them purposely for them to find. The notes,
which I find incredibly curious, because she's maintained her innocence throughout.
Yeah. I mean, she sort of, in the trial, the way she described these were just her, getting things out of her brain. And, and in some ways I can come at that, but there are certain words within these, like, there's literally sticky notes, size.
Post-it notes,
of paper with like a million words on that one sticky note. It scribbles
like tiny little,
little scribblings and stuff. It literally is manic.
It is.
And so, like, one big word being circled and written over a million times, hate, and, kill me and things like that. And there were certain words within it. There was, there'd be like a long passage of something being written, but then there'd be these little words written all over the sides and things. I can't even,
definitely Google it, because you have to see it to kind of believe it.
Yeah.
I just wrote down a few little comments on the Post-it notes that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
Help was written a lot. It was like, help, help, help me, please help me. You're not the one who needs help. Well, she does need help.
Oh, gotcha.
But again, like in this instance, playing the victim, and this becomes a bit of a theme over time.
Yeah.
Another one said, "I'm sorry you couldn't have a chance at life." One that said, "I haven't done anything wrong." And then another one that said, actually, I think this was actually on the same Post-it. It said, "I am evil. I did this."
Yeah. And on that same Post-it, she wrote, "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough."
I literally just had that written down. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. And that rings to also a message she sent to a particular doctor around wanting him to then, but she really was manipulative. Like when you really look at it after effect, and when you really understand that this is a woman who has done this, she was very manipulative, and she wanted the attention of people, and she planted seeds with this one particular doctor that we can talk about, and wanted him to.
Are you talking about the doctor she potentially had a relationship with?
Yeah.
A married doctor who she potentially had a relationship with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she wanted him to be like, "Oh, you're amazing, you're great. Don't say that about yourself," So that to me it was the similar stuff she'd written in messages to him around, "Oh, I'm just not good enough. That's why these babies are dying. I'm not doing my job well enough." And he was, "No, you're like the best at your job, and I'd even give my own children to you. You're the only nurse that I'd let my own children be taken care of." And she relished in all of that. Oh,
yeah.
God.
She absolutely did. Like she absolutely loved the attention. The thing that I find really interesting is when they showed her these images at the trial, she denied that they were even a confession.
Yeah, right. I can't remember what did she say about them?
Yeah, so she basically, she was like, "Oh, they were just, I needed to get my thoughts and feelings out onto a piece of paper, but it doesn't mean, they didn't mean that I've done it." I'm like, "Well, you've written, 'I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them,' on a Post-it note."
Yeah.
What else could that mean?
Yeah. All right. So the other sorts of things they found in her house included like photos of cards that she'd written to families, like sympathy cards to families of babies who had passed away. But also they found,
Which, I mean, I can kind of come at that. I think if you were a nurse caring for a baby, you must be so intricately involved in that family's life for that time.
Yeah.
I can imagine that it would foster a relationship that was quite deep quite quickly.
Oh, I'm all for her writing the cards, but do you take photos of
taking photos of them and keeping them? Absolutely not.
That's
Absolutely not. I mean, that means it's about her. It's not about sending a sympathy card to the family, is it?
I mean, I know I'm a little bit anal sometimes. I don't know. Did you know that about me? And if I wrote like a really good one to a family and went, "Oh, that's like the best wording for that. I've like really nailed that," or something that, that's good wording to use for a family to experience this, I can come at it somewhat to kind of go, "I'm going to take a photo of that," because then if I ever have to write another one, I'll remember what I wrote to write to express it to the family how that must feel, and try and. But I still just, I don't know. I still, even at that point, I don't know if I could really come at her keeping them, and I don't know.
Well, knowing what we know now, I think it's,
again, it's
another
little arrow pointing at her. Like, isn't it? It's on its own. It's nothing. It's within all of it. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
So the other thing they found in her bedroom, which her bedroom and stuff in itself is we'll chat. But they found under her bed was like plastic bags full of confidential documentation from the hospital that is completely illegal for her to be removing from the hospital. And she sort of fobbed that off as being, "Oh, it's just, a busy nurse taking
I
things
just left it in my pocket accidentally."
in my pocket, which, yes, I can understand that happening 100% for like one or two bits of
One or
paper.
two.
Like, this
They
was
found
pages.
257 notes.
One a week, one a shift.
Yeah, maybe. But even then, no, because, you know, at the end of the day, you're like, right, you're not wanting to take that stuff home.
No. Surely not. And that's where, I mean, to me, they were more trophies than anything else.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, but her bedroom as well was a whole next level. So there was, like, very immature is the way it's been sort of described, very pink and white. And this was the bedroom of a house that she purchased herself. This was not her bedroom from when she was, 12 years old and she's still living at home with her parents and hadn't updated it since then. This is the house she bought with her money as a working nurse, and she was decorating as an adult. I mean, to be honest, well done on her buying her own home, like, without, don't need a man for this. Like, I love that. I'm all for it. And so wouldn't you then be buying this house and setting it up going, I'm an adult, I'm doing this life on, here I am. But she's gone and decorated it like a child with, like, frames with glitter on them, like, shine like a diamond, kind of stuff, and quotes on things. Even her bedspread was, sweet dreams embroidered on it.
She was over 30. Like, it's just, it's interesting.
Yeah. So the other one I'd like to let you know about that I've discovered. So
go on, I am dying to hear this. I've been teased about this all day.
I hope it's as mind-blowing for me as it was when I worked this out. So
go on.
All right. So this house that she purchased herself, she purchased it in April 2016 and purchased it in, March 2016.
Okay.
She purchased the house, moved in April 2016. So this is like within her killing spree time frame. So she's still killing babies, like, well until June 2016. So she is in the midst of that. So this house that she chose and purchased on her own, there's the back fence. There's then a path, like a bike track kind of thing, a fence, and then a cemetery. Right. So if you go onto Google Maps and you look Google Earth and look down on it, you can see where her house is, and you can see this cemetery at the back of her house. And I just honed in onto Street View, into the cemetery, and you see, and there's a corner of, like, right behind her house, and this beautiful little garden bit in this cemetery, and a sign that popped up, Baby Garden Memorial.
Oh.
So in the peak of winter, when all the leaves fall off the trees, she would 100% be able to see that Baby Garden Memorial from her house.
Oh.
Out her bedroom window, I dare say. Like, it's, yeah.
Oh, now, my God.
The other thing to think
coincidence
about is she's working and living 5 minutes down the road from the hospital where she was, right?
Yeah.
So I dare say these are local families who are losing these babies at that hospital.
Yep.
It is quite possible, and I cannot verify this. There's no way, because it's not public knowledge who these babies are. But it is highly likely that there are babies that she murdered that are buried in that cemetery.
Oh, my God.
So did she choose that house for that reason, or was it just coincidence?
Oh. Well, I know what she'd say.
Oh, didn't even know it was there. Sorry, no, this is how she'd say it. I didn't even know. She talks in the most infuriating, like, low voice, calm.
Which I find really interesting, because, and I wonder whether she was like this while she was nursing. You want your nurse to be calm, but you also want them to be confident and, instill a sense of, I don't know, taking charge of a situation. If she spoke to me like that as a parent, I don't know, her voice just, is it because I know what she's since done? I'm not sure, but it just rubs me up the wrong way.
Even her facial
she's got
she doesn't have, she was very bland and very she had no expression in all of, like, this in terms of the court case and things. most of the time her face didn't change.
I wonder whether her lawyers advised her to be that way during the hearing. I don't know.
If you can do it the way she did it, like, and purposely. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in her mugshot, even. It's like there is nothing there. Like
nothing.
No.
No. I know they also found in her room a diary, and the cover of the diary, I believe, was marked with every baby who died. It was marked with their initials and the exact date of their death. The cover of her diary.
Oh God! I saw the front cover of it, like the diary, which literally would have been bought in like a 6-year-old's section at the $2 shop.
Yeah, that's it.
Holy cow! And then so then have that written inside it.
On the inside of the cover, it's I mean, as you said, it's trophy. She wanted to remember it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is probably a good time to go into, what the police and the prosecutors say the motives were.
Yeah.
So the first motive that they proposed was that she was playing God, or it was a hero type complex, and that, she felt all powerful, and that this was, something that she was empowered to do in a way.
Yep.
Gross.
Yep.
The second was that she got a thrill out of it, and I think to a certain degree she did. She loved the thrill of the commotion that came with it, the rush of everyone coming in. We spoke just before about it's never been confirmed, has it, that she had an affair with that doctor?
No, but they certainly spent, overnight time in London together, and things like that.
Yes, and didn't they go away for a few days somewhere together or something? Somewhere seaside.
Yeah,
he's ringing a bell
with kids.
Yep.
And so I don't. Yeah.
Anyway, one of the theories is that she was trying to get his attention, and so when he wasn't on shift for every death or every incident, it's probably worth noting, but if he was on shift, he'd come running to the code and attend to the babies and attend to her, and then she'd always get the messages afterwards to say, are you okay? That's really difficult. Is there anything we can do? Not only from him, but from her co-workers as well.
Yeah. But he even would offer her, if you're feeling not up for it today after what happened last night, you can have my car and go home early and I'll pick it up later. And there was text messages around things like that. So he was certainly complicit to the relationship, and being, whether it was friendly or more. He certainly messaged her multiple times and would initiate as well.
There was definitely something going on there, whether or not it had turned physical.
About it in text messages with her saying, you've got a crush on him, and I think he feels the same way about you. Yeah.
Yeah. The text exchange
was it? Sorry, I just remembered from the
No, go.
I haven't even looked at this recently because I remember it just literally from listening to the podcast when the trial was occurring, that when he gave his evidence at trial, that was the only time she really showed any emotion, but it was uncontrollable emotion. She cried and didn't want to be in the room. She tried to actually exit the courtroom. Even they took her quite some time for the courts to get her to sit back down and to sit there through his testimony, because he supported her through the whole time of this going on in the hospital. But then when it came to trial, I think he obviously had realised by that stage, oh, hang on a second, she has done something here. And so his evidence at trial was against her, and she didn't want to be in that room when he was doing that. Yeah,
that got her, didn't it? The final motive that I saw suggested was factitious disorder imposed on another, which used to be called Munchausen by proxy.
I get confused with this because Munchausen by proxy, it's not considered a mental health.
No.
As in, it's only diagnosable in the moment of them doing it.
Of it actually happening, yeah.
So you don't actually have it 24/7, 7 days a week.
No. There's lots of very famous cases of this. The one that comes to mind most notably is Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her mum.
Yeah.
And
what's the one in the UK too that we listened to a podcast about that? What was that little one?
Oh, I can't remember the exact name of that, but
I'll find
that podcast, we will definitely pop a link to that podcast below as well, because that is really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I just think too, because it's UK as well, like with the story being UK.
Yeah, it kind of links. It does. And I guess the motive with Munchausen by proxy or factitious disorder imposed on another is that you actually, as the person inflicting that, you're getting the attention for the illness of the person that you're inflicting that on. So,
Yes. And the thing with
again,
that when you sort of throw that in there as the mix of being a possibility, in those notes and ramblings of the crazy person, she wrote in there as well about things about that I will never have children.
Yep.
Which I see two sides of that. Really, there's the side of like, yeah, she'll never have children because she she doesn't see herself as being meeting somebody, you know, and having that relationship to have a child, or does she know that she'll never have a baby because if she did, she'd kill it?
That's big. That's true.
Mm.
I wonder.
Yeah.
And it could actually potentially go both.
Yeah.
Could be both.
Yeah. And has she chosen to be someone who doesn't have children because she knows she won't be able to mother it and be...
I think she'd also never had a serious relationship.
Yeah. Again...
I mean, she was in a lot of ways, she was very immature in that sense.
Yes. Even in the messages back and forth between herself and her colleagues around the relationship of her and that doctor, there was very immature chat around the crush sort of situation. Even like, I don't know, he doesn't look at me like that.
Like, you're actually over 30. It's okay to, I mean, it's not okay to pursue a married man, nor is it okay for the married man to pursue her. But yeah, why talk like that? It's really bizarre. It's not high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also wonder, her parents supported her and still do support her through and through. She's an only child, and it sounds as though she was very indulged as a child and as a grown-up, and maybe that kept an immaturity in her. She was still like a child to her parents.
Oh, big time.
They've sold their house now and have moved to where she's in prison.
Yeah.
So their entire lives, I think they're in their 70s. I think her mum's in her 60s, her dad's in his 70s. Their entire lives have been completely turned around because of what she's done.
Yeah.
They still support her. Her mum said when she was, so it's probably worth saying that she was actually convicted after the trial. Getting a bit ahead of myself there. Get ahead of myself? No. So she was actually convicted of 7 counts of murder of 7 babies, 7 counts of attempted murder of 6 babies, because we know she attempted murder on one of those babies twice. And then 6 counts were unable to reach a verdict.
She was then 2 counts too, wasn't she? Like there were 2.
She was she was cleared of 2 counts.
Right.
She received a sentence.
I wonder about that, like how the jury came to that conclusion when. I know the judge mentioned this in his closing statement to the jury around the fact of like if she's guilty of one, like you kind of have to assume, or like not saying that you have to find her guilty of the rest, but there's a more higher chance that someone who's able to do this once is able to do it multiple times. So I find it really interesting they found 2 counts. They were able to clear her of those 2 and that she was involved. And I don't know which counts they were off the top of my head now, which ones she was.
No, I don't. In fact, I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure either off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I believe they were attempted murder charges, not murder charges.
No, she was definitely found guilty of all the murder charges put to her.
The murders, that's right.
But it was definitely 2 of the attempts. But I just don't know how that would land.
Same. I just think I feel for those families whose babies she wasn't convicted of harming, because while she was then sentenced to a whole life order, which in the UK you can get a life sentence, which means you are eligible for parole, or you can get a whole life order, which means you are never to be released, and that's what she was sentenced to. She didn't attend her sentencing, which meant she didn't hear any victim impact statements, which I just think is the coward's way out. I think it's disgusting. That can happen. That happens in Australia as well. And I think at the end of the day, if you're convicted of murder or of whatever charge that has been brought upon you, you should sit there and face the music. You should be forced to witness that
That's my
and
only
see the
issue with
impact
it,
of your actions.
is that you would have to be forced, and therefore my only thing is that you're then putting people in danger of somehow. How do you force that person into a courtroom to listen? I mean, you're going to end up with shit shows, basically, with people like Lucy Letby or someone that creating this circus around just getting her into the courtroom and then listening to that. I mean, there's nothing stopping her from sitting there, la, 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 like, and refusing to listen, and then refusing to behave in that court sense that they then have to remand her and, remove her to be able to, maintain.
I totally understand that side of things. I just think it's just, why should they get away with it?
I 100%
you're
agree with
absolutely
you.
right.
Yeah. No, I think it's so disrespectful to those victims. I mean, if she to this day, sticks to her story that she did nothing wrong. But I mean, at the end of the day, really, there's nothing but evidence pointing at her.
Well, in January 2024, she made lodged an application to the Court of Appeal.
Yes.
The judge refused the application. She tried again in Feb 2024, and this time it was accepted.
Mm-hmm.
There was a 3-day hearing in April of this year, of 2024, and we're still waiting on the outcome of that, to see whether or not an appeal will go ahead. From what I can gather, it's very, very unlikely. CPS, or Child Protective Services in the UK, have announced that they are going to retry the 6 counts that a verdict was unable to be reached upon.
Mm-hmm.
And a trial date has been set tentatively for the 10th of June 2024. So for us in a month, or not even, it's in a few weeks now.
So we might have an update on this case coming up.
We will definitely have an update. The only thing that could potentially delay that court date is the outcome of
the appeal, I guess.
Of the appeal application. So, wait and see for that end of things.
In respect to those cases, in terms of like the attempted murders too, and some of them not having an outcome, what I find most devastating about that is, I mean, we look at it as just attempted murder, but the simple fact is many of those children have lifelong issues now,
deficits,
that are due to what Lucy Letby did. And like, they include blindness, cerebral palsy, paralysis, non-verbal and learning difficulties. And in Child N's case, there's nothing that the child has disability-wise. However, Child N's parents are so distressed and worried about their child and don't have any trust in any other system, that they are homeschooling their child. So that's so many layers.
Lifelong impacts for all of these children.
That little,
and their families.
Girl at Child N, but would now be
boy
7, 8, 9, even 9. And so that little child is now being homeschooled and not having that experience of a school system, which, I mean, many people say is a great way to raise your child, and I have no disrespect to that, but to not have any trust in anyone else to be able to take care of your child, that's going to have impacts in terms of how you run your life as well. So the stress it's caused is horrendous, let alone these children who actually have brain damage that has caused absolutely irreparable damage. That's just heartbreaking.
It absolutely is. And we can only hope, I guess, that for the families of the 6 awaiting a verdict still, that this does end up going to retrial and they get the outcome that they want. And although that's not going to change the sentence of Lucy Letby, that'll be just a little bit of, I don't know, a bit of what's the word I'm looking for, like validation in their mind about what's happened to their child, and confirmation that they have been impacted by a person.
But there's also still ongoing investigations in terms of other cases that weren't brought to court in this trial. So they're still looking at, I think, 4,000 babies that she's had come into contact with since her time at the Countess I am so sorry about my son coughing every 5 minutes.
This is what happens when we're at home with sick children, Meg.
Yes. So yeah, so she's, what was I saying?
Hey, now he can say he was on the podcast. That's all he's ever wanted.
Yep, it's all he's ever wanted. So he's living his dream over there, coughing his guts up. So yeah, so they're still looking at up to 4,000 babies that she's come into contact with from her time from 2012 until 2016 on the ward at the Countess. So there could be more charges put to her, even though there's an appeal that, as we said, we don't know where that's at this point in time. But for all we know, there could be a whole other trial happening with more cases. So we'll wait and
stay tuned. We will do an update episode when we know a little bit more.
Yeah. But oh my gosh, she is one Fruit Loop, because you look at her as being this innocent nurse, caring, very attractive young woman. You look at her as not being anyone who would hurt a fly, and yet she is a serial killer. And not only a serial killer, she is the most prolific child murderer in the UK to date. So
male or female?
Male or female.
Wow.
Yeah. And I honestly, serial killer has not been used enough to describe her. I find even myself, you say, that yes, she killed babies. She's a murderer. We don't use serial killer to describe her, and she is 100% a serial killer.
Yeah.
Of the most vulnerable children in the even possible. Like, she is just, how on earth anyone could do what she did.
I think you were saying that when you go into hospital or when you go into a setting like that, you are at your most vulnerable, and you put all of your faith and trust in the medical professionals who look after you. And 99.99% of the time, people go into that profession because they are caring. They want to make a difference. They want to help people. They want the best outcome for their patients. To have somebody go against that, it's so offensive to our sensibilities as human beings. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And it's actually really hard to believe and hard to get your head around.
And it makes me I think about, with her, I'm like, what came first? Was it the want to kill, and therefore she went into nursing and thinking that was her access point? Or did she genuinely go into nursing and then all of a sudden become, actually, I can play God here?
I feel like it was the latter. If you were going to become a serial killer, or if that was what was in your mind, I don't think you don't have to become a nurse to be able to do things like that. I guess in terms of access, maybe access to vulnerable patients.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of it. But
I mean, when you look at her in terms of,
there's no rhyme or reason to any of it. So it's not like you can think with a logical brain and go, oh, that doesn't really make sense, because who knows what she was actually thinking.
Well, this is it. I want to jump into her brain and find out how the hell that thing ticks. But because I mean, the ramblings on those notes say a lot, but not enough. So it doesn't. They still don't connect dots entirely for me of how insane she was or is. The word psychopath has been used to describe her, and I'm not using that derogatorily. It's legit, way to diagnose her. The way that she thinks and feels, and the fact that she has no remorse, is just very telling. But obviously, from those notes, she has an awareness of what she did too. So that's
absolutely
makes a true psychopath.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christ.
Anyway, stay tuned, and we'll keep you updated as soon as we know more.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Well, we've got our work cut out for us for editing today's podcast with coughing and dogs. So we'll work on that over the next few days. And we'll get this out to everyone. But we'll also post onto the socials some of those, maybe some of the pictures of the notes, and also maybe I'll pinpoint the cemetery at the back on Google Earth.
Oh yeah, please do that.
It's quite And when I scrolling in, looking closer and closer, and seeing this sign just blew my mind. And going, oh God, she's even worse than I thought somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll pop all those up on the socials, but please, as we say, click on subscribe. That's the best way we can have more people finding our podcast and coming and joining us on our great conversations, because we love hanging out with our besties and chatting about crime.
That's it. So follow us on Instagram at True Crime Besties, and we're also on Facebook under the same handle.
Yeah, and if we get really confident, we'll put these videos up on YouTube.
Oh. I guess we will.
Yeah.
Hey, then we can call ourselves YouTubers.
Oh my God, our kids
are amazing.
Oh man, we're so cool.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, True Crime Besties.
We've just talking over the top of each other. We're like 3 seconds in.
Oh, we're professionals.
Yeah. That's us, totally.